Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. We have a new year and a new show. This is not financial advice live or NFA live. Thought it'd be a great idea to start a new show as we get into the new year, have a new way to talk about everything going on within the cryptoverse. Obviously, it's a very exciting time in crypto, coming out of a pretty standard bear market year. But we have a bit of a new format this year. We have Rob from Digital Asset News. You'll see him over in the top left. But we also, for the first time, well, I guess he's been on my channel once before. But for the first time on a live stream, we have Guy from Coin Bureau. So we are going to be doing this show every single week. We're going to rotate whose channel it's on. And this week, of course, it is on my channel. And I'm just going to go ahead and tweet this stuff out so that everyone knows that we are live. And what we're going to do, if you're not familiar, is we're just going to go through basically a lot of different questions and try to answer as many questions as we can. And at the end of the show, what we'll do is we'll actually field some audience questions. If you have any questions you'd like to have potentially get answered by one of us up here, you can ask those at the end of the show, and then we'll try to get through as many of those as we can as well. So before we get started, if you're not subscribed to Rob or Guy, make sure you do so. You can find the links to their YouTube channels down in the description below. And everyone knows who, Guy's only been on the channel one time, but you're living under a rock if you don't know who he is. He has like the most popular cryptocurrency YouTube channel. It's called Coin Bureau. But we're actually going to be doing the live streams from his live stream, his clips channel. So make sure you go subscribe to that one. That's a smaller channel, but that's where the live streams are going to be. So if you're wondering one week, like, where's the NFA live going to be? Sometimes it'll be on Rob's channel. Sometimes it'll be on mine. And then sometimes it'll be on Guy's Coin Bureau clips channel. So again, links to all that in the description below. And we'll just rotate this every single Thursday. It's a pleasure to have you here, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, likewise.
So, the questions for the new year. So, just to provide a brief outline, we're going to be first talking about now that 2022 is over, right? Pretty typical bear market year, not unlike 2014 and 2018. What's making you somewhat optimistic for 2023? But are there any things that are keeping you somewhat cautious? It's always good to be somewhat cautious. Additionally, and this is something that I've talked a little bit about with Guy when he actually came on my channel. There's been a lot of stuff that happened with FTX, with Celsius, with BlockFi, with Luna, ongoing developments and a lot of these different things. How is this going to affect upcoming regulations? Are we going to see these types of regulations coming in soon? What does that look like? The third thing, we're going to talk a little bit about altcoins. It is 2023, so I think it's a little bit more okay this year than last year. But we have some like OG coins like Litecoin, Monero. They've been outperforming a little bit, and I want to talk a little bit about that. 2022 was certainly a bear market year, and now that we're in 2023, normally we see some type of a recovery year. Sometimes we can put in a new low. As 2015 showed us, it is still possible to put in a new low, even if it is mostly a boring year. So with that in mind, what are the sectors of crypto that you're most excited about potentially accumulating, before a theoretical future bull run in crypto, maybe around the 2024, 2025 timeframe? And the last question will be about a potential recession, and this has sort of been the talk of the town for quite a while. A lot of indicators suggest a recession is coming. And if a recession does in fact come, how do you think that will affect Bitcoin and the cryptoverse in general? So those are the questions. We'll go through them one by one, and then at the end we'll field as many questions from the audience as we can. So, Guy, we're going to start with you. I want to let you have the floor, and the first question is: now that 2022 is over, what do you think 2023 has in store for crypto? What do you think we have in store this year? And what are some things that are making you optimistic? What are some things that keep you somewhat cautious?
Sure. Thanks, Ben. I think to start with, 2023, I think I'm almost certain that we're going to see some new lows this year. I think there are just too many macro headwinds. I think there's too much stuff out there to be concerned about, both macro and perhaps some crypto specific things as well. So I am expecting that we are going to see new lows, probably in the in Q1 would be my best guess. So I think we've got that to look forward to, and then probably in terms of price action, I would imagine a fair amount of trading sideways really for the rest of the year. And I would hope that we'll be starting to see green shoots, starting to see signs of a recovery towards the end of the year, maybe sort of late Q3, early Q4. But that would be, at the very earliest for that. So in terms of price action, I don't think we're going to see a spectacularly interesting year from, in those sorts of terms. I think it's going to be a year, especially once those lows are in, I think it's going to be a year for slow accumulation, for dollar cost averaging and things like that. It's, but, certainly a year to proceed with caution. But having said that, I mean, there are lots of things that I am, well, let's talk about the things that I'm kind of optimistic about first, because obviously, there are plenty of concerns out there, but I am optimistic about a lot of things. I think for a start, I mean, just the fact that we've managed to get past 2022 and, we've seen this huge clear out, if you like, in the industry. We've seen a lot of these over-leveraged and incompetent ceasefires. I mean, let's call it what it is. A lot of these people and companies flushed out of the market. And although that's been painful, although that has, really dragged the whole market down, I think in the long term, that is going to prove to be a good thing. That is a kind of necessary cleansing, a necessary process of, I guess you could call it, like creative destruction. And I think that is going to be, that I think is going to pave the way for a lot more development over this year. And I think this is the big opportunity of 2023, I think, from the point of view of crypto projects and crypto investors as well. We're going to be operating in a largely hype-free environment, I think. And that is a really good thing because, hype, it clouds the picture. It makes it very difficult to see the wood for the trees sometimes. So I'm optimistic about the fact that good quality projects are not only going to be able to kind of get on with the important process of development, with the process of building, but also, I hope perhaps attract, some of those developers from the not so good projects, those projects that have been kind of flushed out. And I think we may have discussed this before, a developer shortage in cryptocurrency has been one of the big things that's held a lot of projects back. And I really hope that we see, those developers move across a sort of rearrangement of the deck, if you like, and those projects which are really, really going places will be able to attract those developers, pick them up from the ones that that didn't have so much potential, and I think that could be, that will be hugely. We'll feel the benefits of that in 2024 and beyond. So. I'm optimistic about seeing a lot of building, and I'm looking forward really to a year hopefully without too much hype, because I think it's something that we all need as an industry. It's we need that period, or that kind of fallow period, if you like, before everything can start growing again. So yeah, I'm optimistic about the fact that I hope we've seen the last of the pain. I'm not holding my breath for there not to be some other, some black swan on the horizon. Perhaps there are, and like I say, as we'll touch on in a minute, there are plenty of concerns, plenty of things to be worried about as well. But I feel I was sort of thinking about this right towards the end of last year, and how we got through it, and how I was so pleased that 2022 was over. But it was great to think that crypto has survived this whole period, and it's survived without any bailouts. No one's come to its aid. No one's ridden in to help us, and the industry has been convulsed by what happened first with Terra, and then with Celsius and Voyager, and then FTX and Alameda was just something else entirely, and yet. Here we still are. The industry is still here. We are still here. There is still building going on, and there are still plenty of reasons to be optimistic. So yeah, I must say, I sort of started this year off feeling very positive despite what lies ahead.
Yeah, I mean, historically, 2015, 2019, I think when you kind of look back on them, those were some of the best times in crypto, right? Where the hype is not really there, people are just building. Maybe we put in new lows, maybe we don't, but the whole point is, the cryptoverse is trying to recover, right? It's just trying to basically recover. Rob, what do you think? I mean, do you think, well, what makes you optimistic, or what keeps you cautious, or keeps you up at night wondering, well, what about this?
So, I mean, on my channel, and first of all, great responses from Guy. There was on my channel, I've been pretty bearish for quite some time, right? And I get a lot of comments about Rob, you're very bearish, you're very bearish. And it's just the reality of the situation. However, moving forward in 2023, I am cautiously optimistic. And one of those things that makes me optimistic, just touching on what Guy said, was about the projects that are building in the background. I had a meeting with Ken Oling. He is the CEO of Meld. And it was supposed to be for like 15 minutes. We ended up talking for like 2 hours. And I just asked him, I go, how things are going? How are you guys building? And at first it was a little bit of a, we're doing okay, and so on and so forth. I go, but how are things going? He goes, I'll be honest with you. He said, right now that all of our competitors and all the people, all the different products that are out there just kind of getting flushed away, he goes, this is the best time. He goes, we've picked up some really good acquisitions as far as the people, the developers, like Guy was talking about, and they're coming in. We can get so many things done because there's not so much hype, and then it kind of like sheds a spotlight on us. So there's that part right there, and then of course I'm in Puerto Rico, which is like the OG capital of crypto people back in the day. And the people I meet here, you'll never hear them on social media. You'll never hear them on Twitter. You'll never see them on a YouTube channel. But the things that we talk about are like, there's things that are going on in the background, which I just see a lot of building, which is good. So for me, I think this is a good year. I mean, like you just said, Ben, 2015, 2 years after the all-time high are usually pretty good, usually. 2013 was an all-time high. Then two years later, 2015 was like the recovery year.
Right.
Same thing with 2017 and 2019, same thing with 2021, and now we're in 2023. January usually is a crappy month, let's be honest, after that, if we take a look at historically, but it's moving in the right direction. And then the things that also make me very somewhat bullish is this talk about tokenization of securities. I mean, you had Larry Fink talk about it, who's the CEO of BlackRock, was 10 trillion assets under management. I've also had discussions with people from Switzerland and things like that. They say it's the same thing happening. Same thing happened when I talked with Ken, tokenization of assets and the different companies that are contacting him. So that's good. The problem is that in 2023, we know a recession's coming. I mean, some people will say it's here. Some people say, no, it'll never come. I think it's going to come. I don't know how big it's going to be. It's going to be soft or whatnot. But I think there's that macro backdrop. The Fed is not going to, they just talked about it yesterday. Like, look, we're going to keep these rates high and we're not going to pivot anytime soon. And then there's a little war in Ukraine. And then, of course, there's also, like Guy talked about, the Black Swan events. I'm kind of concerned with what's going on with the DCG group and Barry Silbert and Grayscale. And I don't know where things are going, but with Genesis, I'm surprised they haven't filed Chapter 11. That could be the next shoe to fall. However, yes, this year isn't going to be maybe the greatest of all time. I don't think we're going to hit 250,000 like what was his name said. I just think we'll hopefully grow, but I'm cautiously optimistic. Does that mean that in 2025, 2026, we won't see some all-time highs? Yeah, maybe, but I'm here for the long haul, and that's where I think we're going.
It's interesting because this whole thing with the DCG and all this sort of stuff, there's always something hanging over our heads, right? Like, all right, is this going to be the next shoe to drop? And we never really fully know. But that does raise the question, right? With all this stuff that's happened this year, and Rob, we'll just sort of change the order who answers this. So this question will go straight back to Rob, and then we'll go to Guy after that. My question really is, we've had Celsius, BlockFi, Voyager, FTX, Alameda, Three Arrows Capital, Luna. The list just goes on and on, right? And there's been so much fraud as well. I mean, there's some on-chain detectives on Twitter that are constantly digging up stuff in sectors of the cryptoverse that sometimes I didn't even know existed, but there's like fraud like in every in so many different areas. But one of the things I'm curious about, at least to hear what you think about it, is what is your opinion on regulation? Because regulation has been something that theoretically the cryptoverse has needed for a while. I mean, I guess we could argue whether the cryptoverse needs it or not, but to some degree, I think we could make that argument that until there's some type of regulation, it's going to keep some of the bigger fish out of our little pond, right? So that's something I think we need to consider. So what do you think about that? I mean, do you think regulation is coming, or do you think it's going to be delayed for a future bear market, right? Regulation is always very slow to actually take place.
Man, Guy, I remember Guy had the Coin Bureau conference. I think it was it in April of 2022 when I came down there?
Yeah. And it seriously feels, Rob, like it was about April 1996. It feels like years ago because so much has happened since then. But yeah, April 22. Yeah.
Yeah, so me and Guy are on stage, right? And Guy's asking me questions, and we're just going through the same things, just answering basic stuff. And I turned to him, and Guy asked me about like regulation or things that are going to happen in the future and things that need to happen. I looked at Guy, I go, well, this is not going to be popular, but let me just say it. I go, we need regulation. We need regulators to say what is just some clarity, really, what it is. What is a commodity? What is a currency? What is a security? And just go from there. And I could like feel not the hatred, but just a little bit of a little heat on me as I was sitting there and Guy was asking the question. And I still feel it today. Like here's the thing. What I think is going to happen is I don't know what it's going to be like in the EU, and I'm glad Guy's here because he can talk about regulation in that area. But right here in the United States, we just had midterms, and right now we're looking at the Senate is still democratically controlled. The House is now controlled by the Republicans. I think it's 222 to 220 or 212, somewhere around there. It's a very, very narrow margin, which means you can sometimes get some things done. I think the first things that are going to actually get done is what we saw with FTX, which is they're going to start to regulate a little bit harder the centralized exchanges. And some people say, well, they're already regulated, which is true. I mean, we've got Gemini, we've got Coinbase, Binance US, debatable. But the thing is, with those coming forward and the things that are happening with these exchanges per se, people say those are regulated. They are, but I don't know about just how much we can say is like the commingling of funds. Because I mean, with Coinbase, a publicly traded company, they can't do that. They shouldn't do that. FTX just from allegedly was just outright fraud. So if we can just get something like with that, the no commingling of funds, I think it'll be pretty good. I think what's going to happen is the centralized exchanges are going to feel more heat. The House and the Senate and Congress are going to put a little bit more pressure on that situation. As far as like to regulate cryptocurrencies and digital assets, you can't really regulate them because how can you regulate a decentralized part? The only thing you can do is you can regulate the on-ramps and the off-ramps. You can also shut down mixers. What was the other one that was just recently shut down? Of course, they put that poor developer in jail and those types of things. But as far as like regulating crypto and saying we're going to ban Bitcoin or something like that, you can't do that. You can just make it more difficult. And then of course, what happens? Well, America misses out and it just shoots over to other parts of the world in Asia and EU and those types of things. So as far as like the optimism, if we still have Gary Gensler in place for the SEC, he's proven he works at a snail's pace. He was investigating the FTX for months before that shoe dropped. So I don't think we can expect much from him. I wish we still had like a Brian Brooks, who was in the OCC, or Quinones for the CFTC. That would probably help because they were more pro crypto. And then right now, I can only speak for America because this is how I see it. There are very few senators and congressmen who really understand crypto and digital assets. And those ones have to teach the rest of those people that are in there. And then I don't think things are going to happen for quite some time because they don't know exactly what's happening. So just expect centralized exchanges to get regulated first. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, it always feels like they're about to regulate and then like we wait and then nothing happens. Like, Guy, what are you seeing over where you are? Do you see any regulations kind of coming through the pipeline, or is everything just going to be kicked down the road another few years?
Well, here in Dubai, I mean, they certainly seem to be forging ahead with it a lot more. There's, and as Rob touched on, I think everyone can see that the US is dragging its feet. It just takes so long for this to happen, and I think there are plenty of other jurisdictions who are happy to see that and want to pick up the slack, want to make themselves a hub for crypto. And the UAE, Dubai especially, has really kind of led the way on that in recent years. But lots of other places are trying to catch up. Before I mention that, can I just ask you guys, because you'll know more about this than me, but am I right in thinking that, because there's at the moment in Congress, is it the House of Representatives, is this the first time they've failed to elect a speaker in 100 years or something?
I don't know if
there's this really weird situation.
So, I mean, for that, so you have Congress, which includes the Senate and House of Representatives. Senate is pretty much set. You get 2 senators per state, and then so you have 100. And right now, I think it's around 48-50, but then you have 2 independents, and then to break the tie, it's the vice president, Kamala Harris. House of Representatives, you have a number of people just based on the number per state. And we've got, it's 222 as far as the Republicans and 211 and 212 for the Democrats. And it has to be the majority to elect the speaker. So of course, the Republicans want their guy, Democrats want, and it just, this I think is the first time, as I understand it, for quite some time. I'm not for sure, I can only go so far back, but it is a pretty telling tale of just how divided we actually are. We can't even say, well, let's just have this guy be the speaker or this lady be the speaker. We can't even get that right. So if we think we're going to have regulation coming in, I'm like, I don't know, we can't even get one thing set. So yeah, that's the answer.
I don't know if we've ever had, haven't they gone through 6 votes now? Or is it now more?
Something like that.
Yeah.
It was close, but they didn't get the majority.
I haven't seen it take this long before.
I saw a video clip of, I think it was AOC talking to Matt Gaetz, and I thought, wow, they must be at a deadlock if those two are discussing it. But it did make me think, in terms of crypto regulations over there in the US, it doesn't fill me full of hope that anything much is going to happen on that front if there's so little chance of any consensus, even over who gets to be Speaker of the House of Representatives. So, yeah. Anyhow, that was a little bit tangential, but I just wanted to ask you guys about that before it kind of slipped my mind. But going back to other parts of the world. Yeah. So the UAE, is certainly trying to position itself as a crypto hub, and it has done so quite successfully because there is a huge crypto community over here. And you certainly, I mean, it's a small place, so you're hyper aware of that. But that's the case nonetheless. You've also got other places like, the UK seems to be forging ahead with crypto regulations. They mostly seem to be around sort of making it easier to seize crypto assets. But I suppose you've got to start somewhere. But certainly, I've been quite surprised by that because the political situation in the UK is, kind of tense at the moment too. But having said that, Rishi Sunak, the new Prime Minister, we don't know how long he's going to last, of course, but he certainly seems to be, on board with this idea of making the UK a hub for digital assets, I think is the phrase that he used. So there's places like the UK, there's places like the UAE as well. I'm quite excited about places like Hong Kong too, because there are rumblings that Hong Kong is going to legalize retail trading for crypto. And I mean, the potential of that is massive because that could well act as a funnel for Chinese investment in general. And I mean, we all know that the Chinese people in general are really, really keen on crypto, but obviously their government isn't quite so hot on it. So I think if we see some kind of regulation from the likes of Hong Kong, then that could, that's a huge source of potential optimism as well. So obviously, we're seeing other places kind of take advantage of the fact that the US is being quite sluggish. And of course, the other one, Ben, as you kind of touched upon, is Europe as well. That the MiCA bill is in a pretty advanced stage now. And I think we discussed this when I was last on your channel, but I was really cheered to see the original MiCA was not great. But when they redrafted it after a period of consultation, it had improved massively, and it was clear that they had listened, they had taken on board suggestions from the crypto lobby, among other places. And the legislation, the proposed legislation was a lot more clear-sighted, was a lot more kind of geared towards, encouraging the growth of crypto, encouraging the growth of the industry, which was really encouraging to see. The only slight concern I have about MiCA at the moment is that this was all kind of drawn up and debated pre-FTX. So I do wonder what's going to happen, what's going to happen with that. This is such a seismic thing that's happened in the industry. Obviously, all these other places that are still playing catch up in regulatory terms are going to be able to react a lot more swiftly to that. And let's face it, the EU does not move quickly. So I do wonder what the upshot of that will be, whether there'll be some kickback from that. But yeah, on the whole, it seems like there are a lot of places that are taking advantage of the fact that as you say, Rob, regulation needs to happen. It's the sort of thing that I think I get the feeling that so many people in the space, particularly I think retail traders and things like that, so many people just want to kind of bury their head in the sand and hope that it goes away. And it won't, for one thing. Regulators, authorities, governments are not going to let that happen. And I think it can be a really good thing. Obviously, we're going to see some regulations imposed that we don't like, and it's going to be the industry's job to push back against them and try and get them changed. But I think we are going to see regulation that is going to allow for the growth of the industry in many different parts of the world, and that can only be a good thing as far as I'm concerned.
My main concern with the United States is just them not getting it done in a timely manner or doing it correctly. Like imagine if they had misstepped on the internet back in the 90s or something. Like how tragic that would have been.
Yeah, exactly. And then one more thing, like when you take a look at all the things that are happening, especially with regulation. So I know people, like Guy said, put your head in the sand. What if we had done that? And what if we had no individuals talking to the regulators and to the politicians, and we just said, you know what, we don't care. We're going to take over anyhow. And what just happened with FTX? Guess what they would have done? It would have been a heck of a lot more regulation, a lot more cramping down on the on ramps and off ramps. Thank God we got enough sense to go, you know what, we want to be part of the discussion now. We want to shape the narrative because we don't want to have them regulate us. We'll tell them where we want them to go. I think it's perfect. And then Guy just said it perfectly with MiCA.
Well, one of the things with regulations, of course, is securities, right? Are they securities? Are they not? Especially with regards to the altcoin market. I think we're fairly confident that Bitcoin is not a security. I think they've been pretty clear about that. I don't think there's really any danger of Bitcoin being declared a security. After that, I would hope that Ethereum is not, but you never know. It could be. We don't fully know. They could change what they've previously said. But one of the things that we've noticed recently is that some, like Litecoin, have been rallying a little bit more than others. Now on its USD pair, you have some of the OG coins. A lot of them, right? If you look at like Monero, Litecoin, and XRP, some of these relics from the 2017 and prior cycles, they didn't really do that well this past bull market, right? Like they just kind of went back up to their all-time high, or maybe they didn't even quite make it there. But in the same way, we are seeing Litecoin outperform a little bit right now, at least against its Bitcoin pair. We've seen Monero on its Bitcoin pair going up for a while. So my question really, and Guy, I'll start with you. Do you think that Litecoin has been showing strength recently? Do you think it's because people are speculating that maybe it's not a security? Bronchitis still with me, sorry. Or do you think that it's more so the halving narrative that Litecoin will have out in August 2023? And with regards to Monero, is it because people are seeking privacy, or what do you make of these recent outperformance of some of these, more of these OG coins as opposed to some of these other alts? Because a lot of the layer ones, except for maybe like ETH and one or two others, a lot of the altcoins have just been absolutely getting decimated on their Bitcoin pairs. I mean, like a lot. I mean, Solana, Cardano, Polkadot, Avalanche. I mean, a lot of these, and a lot of the top 100 coins have just had a pretty bad year. So, what do you make of the recent outperformance of some of these more OG coins?
It's a good question, Ben. I was kind of scratching my head a little bit over Litecoin and XMR, really. I mean, I think firstly with Litecoin, it is a very popular. Well, yes, obviously there is this the fact that it kind of acts as a sort of unofficial test net for Bitcoin, I think is interesting. And I think there could be in the minds of, in the minds of investors and the minds of speculators, it's like, well, I mean, it's obviously a fork of Bitcoin. It obviously has a lot of similarities. So I think the securities question could be a big part of their thinking on that one. I can certainly see a world where, where Litecoin is designated a commodity rather than a security. So I think it's got that going for it. I think it's also got the fact that it is a very popular kind of payment coin as far as as cryptocurrencies go. And it's still the case, isn't it? Whenever you hear of a platform or a company or anything like that integrating crypto payments, what are the ones that are usually on there? It generally tends to be BTC, ETH, Litecoin, Bitcoin Cash, although that seems to be, slowly withering and dying. But right. Yeah, Litecoin, I think certainly it certainly does have that popularity for payments. And I mean, I just wonder whether there's that slight sort of sense of its, people regarding it as a kind of battle tested, it's been around for a long time. It's not something that's necessarily going to go crazy, going to go to the moon, but certainly I think it looks like a lot more of a reliable bet at the moment when you look at the performance of things like Solana or Avalanche, as you mentioned. Right. So I wonder if there's a kind of slight sentimentality for these cryptos that have been around the block a few times and are still there, are still performing. I mean, are still innovating to an extent. I mean, obviously, Litecoin, there's not a huge amount of developer activity happening on it. That said, they did introduce the privacy sidechain last year, didn't they? So there is that kind of privacy angle to it as well, right. Which I think could be could make it an attractive possibility. And in terms of using it as a payment, this is something, Rob, when you were talking about the things that you were optimistic about earlier, it ties into something that came into my head then, because this is more something you occasionally read about it in the crypto media, but it's more something that I've picked up from just kind of talking to people in the industry, people who come up to me and say hello and stuff like that. And I think a big unreported story of last year was the amount of adoption happening outside of places like the US and Europe. The amount of adoption happening in places like Latin America and Africa, and also Middle East, North Africa as well, which is, I think, now one of the the biggest adopter of crypto by region, I think. And I just wonder whether there's a case to be made for Litecoin there. People are using it as a means of payment, because in these places, crypto is being used much more than it's being speculated on. We tend to be investors here in, if you like, developed countries in the West. But actually, there's a whole lot of people using crypto, using it as a medium of exchange and using it for payments. And Litecoin, I mean, that is what Litecoin is designed to do. So. Yeah, I think those are my best guesses as to why Litecoin has performed relatively well in contrast to pretty much everything else. Monero, yeah, again, I think maybe there's the fact that I think the privacy aspect of it is a big one for people. People, again, I think using it as payment as well, because I think more and more people are starting to appreciate the importance of privacy in payments. More and more people are becoming aware of what their governments are doing, just how much information, how much data their governments are gathering on them. And I think for those in the know, XMR, it really fulfills a good purpose in that, in keeping certain transactions private. Maybe it's not the sort of thing that people are going to transact with all the time. But yeah, everyone has plenty of reasons for wanting to keep certain payments private. So I wonder if, that kind of explains Monero's sort of general resilience.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because, Litecoin, it has this thing where it outperforms in its halving years, right? Like 2015, 2019, 2023, up until about 1 month before its halving. So keep that in mind. If you look at 2015 and 2019, it sort of outperformed a lot of these coins, and then like right before the halving, it like kind of went away, and then Bitcoin took over, right? I mean, like, because I mean, then you have the Bitcoin halving to look forward to, which has a much larger effect, I think, on the cryptoverse. Rob, what do you think? I mean, do you agree with Guy on some of this stuff, or any reasons why you think Litecoin, Monero have been outperforming recently? Is it security related? Is it halving related with regards to Litecoin? What do you think?
Yeah. First of all, when is the Litecoin halving
August.
On 2024?
No, 2023.
2023, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's about half a year, a little, maybe like 8 or 9 months or so before Bitcoin's.
Right. So like at first when Guy was talking, I was like, that doesn't make any sense. But I was like, I took a look as Guy was talking. There's a great website, bitinfocharts.com. You can take a look at comparison and transaction fees. Remember the big run up when we had the last, bull market 2021, around April, May, somewhere around there, there's a big spike. The transaction fees for Litecoin, as much as things were being used, and you can take a look at Litecoin, it's between a penny and 2 pennies for like the last 18 months. That's the transaction fee. And then Monero is between 1.5 cents and 2.5 cents for the whole time with this huge run up. And if you take a look at like Bitcoin transaction fees, you're looking over $50 in some places, $38, depending on the high input output time. And then Ethereum is like ridiculous. I mean, you're looking at $76, $82 somewhere around there for like transaction. That's not what crypto was supposed to be, right? So I can understand, like when Guy was saying, I was like, but I look at it and like, yeah, sure enough, that's what it is. But then another thing is, I mean, there's that part, the fundamentals, but there's also a narrative. And one of the narratives was, I know Michael Saylor came out and was talking about, look, I don't think, he thinks Bitcoin's a commodity. Friend of the show, Gary Gensler, thinks Bitcoin's a commodity. And then Michael Saylor also thinks Bitcoin is a commodity. And he also thinks that Litecoin could be too, because it's a fork of Bitcoin and it's a proof of work consensus mechanism. So I think when those things are in play, then you can say, okay, well, those proof of works could be, because they're maybe somewhat decentralized, so they're going to be a commodity, and then everything will take off the races. I don't think it's going to make that big of a difference moving forward, especially when, let's just play devil's advocate. Everything besides Bitcoin and Litecoin is a security. Okay, so what happens? Well, then all the different exchanges go, well, that sucks. Now we're selling unregistered securities. Now we have to go register with the SEC in America. And whoever knows if that's actually going to be picked up by the world. I don't know if it will or not. So that's a problem. Then the next problem is all the different agencies or all the different projects. Well, they just did an unregistered ICO or unregistered sale of securities. Now they're all going to get fined, which is going to be great for America because they can collect all those taxes and things like that. And then most of those projects will just get wiped away. And if we want to talk about, securities and tokenization, well, that's, I think, going to be the next big thing, because it helps when you've got these big organizations, and then they can eliminate the middleman, tokenize securities, put things on the blockchain, and then sell it to their customers for a discount because they don't have to pay so many fees in between. I think that'll be the next thing. So what Guy said, I'm surprised that it was that cheap. And of course, something with the narrative can also push things forward. Then Monero, maybe people just really pushing for privacy.
The transaction fees for Bitcoin are actually a really good peak indicator. Like whenever it spikes up, like the last 2 bull markets, that's actually it actually spiked in like April, not November, but close enough, right? 64K or 69K, still a fairly good predictor. But yeah, so the next thing I want to touch base on here is, let's assume that, first of all, we're sort of operating under the assumption that crypto will return, right? Like every few years we get into this, crypto is dead narrative, and everyone talks about how it's dead and it's how it's never coming back and everything else. But, it's had a way of being resilient, and it eventually comes back, and usually stronger than it was before. And, one thing with regards to recession is whenever we get past the recession, assuming it happens, that'll probably only make Bitcoin's case even stronger, because then we can no longer say, well, it's never experienced a recession. At that point, well, it has, and it still survived. But what do you assuming that we slowly come back, right? Like we typically do, even if there is potentially more downside. What are you most excited about in terms of picking up? You know, like raw. I mean, like, is it gaming stuff? Is it layer one stuff? Is it NFTs? Is it you know, what is it? Like, what do you think? Is it just Bitcoin? Is it you know, what do you find the most interesting for the next bull cycle?
It's Bitcoin only. I'm going to sell all my alts. Just kidding. So like so Bitcoin is probably, like I always say, it's the most stable in the most unstable market as far as like gains, outside of course, stable coins if you want to play around with that. And then of course the blue chips, like, you know, the Ethereums and things like that. And now it looks like the Litecoins. But when I take a look at the next bull cycle, and we talked about this on the show, we just took a look at how you would do as far as if you dollar cost average 5 different cryptos. If you dollar cost average in 2018, 19, 20, 21, $100 per week, or excuse me, $100 per week. We took a look at Bitcoin, Ethereum, Cardano, Dash, and Salt. There's a specific reason why I picked Dash and Salt. And over time, I mean, the most stable, you know, that's really performed, and Bitcoin's always been number one throughout, you know, market cap, that's the one. However, going into 2025, if you're looking for more risk, because let's be honest, there's a bunch of degens out there, they will go, well, I'd liked a little bit of Bitcoin. And again, this is just like the show says, not financial advice. But if I want to, you know, maybe maximize some of my profit potential, knowing that I will probably, you know, have a rough time and it'll be a lot more volatile, I go into the alts. One of the things that I look at, and this was a question posed to me, which was, if you bought a car and you couldn't resell your car, you'd feel like that was a scam, right? I said, yeah, that would be pretty much a scam. Well, think about that for all the online gaming platforms, and you want to buy weapons and skins and things like that. You can't do that. That only goes to the company. And there's a reason why Fortnite was the first company to make, I think it was over $1 billion within a year. And it's because, and that's a free to play game because of all the things that they bought. Now bring in NFTs. But of course, so like these gaming platforms, NFTs, and then if you really want to be not as risky, the layer one platforms that are building those NFTs on, that would be one to get into. So I take a look at those. I'm like, that's probably a pretty good thing. And also I really like these layer ones, whatever you want to say it. If it's Ethereum, if it's Cardano, if it's Polkadot, if it's Avalanche or Cosmos. And if you want to think about the tokenization of assets, like I've been talking about 3 times now, that's another big thing. So you can, instead of investing into the gold, you just go, I'm going to invest in the picks and shovels and go from there.
What do you think, Guy? I mean, I like the response. I mean, it's a very well-rounded response. Guy, what are you most interested in? I mean, like, are you more on the degen side of the cryptoverse, or do you like to more so go with the blue chips? Where do you stand in all this?
I suppose for the sake of argument, I should try and come down more on the degen side. But I mean, the fact is, guys, as I get older, I get more conservative. So I'm broadly aligned with Rob there. Especially, I think that's a lovely analogy. You know, picks and shovels during the gold rush, and yeah, that's exactly what layer ones are for me. And I think, you know, these are the platforms where the value is going to be found, I think. And I think, you know, in terms of things like NFTs and stuff, I'm bullish long term on NFTs, but I'm more bullish on the layer ones that they're going to be issued on. So yeah, again, the likes of Ethereum, Cosmos, I suppose technically that's a layer 0, isn't it? But yeah, these platforms where these other projects are hosted, you know, these are the ones that I'm kind of excited about. Gaming, well, just to touch on NFTs and stuff, because I think NFTs are going to have a big year, but I don't think it's going to be for the same reasons as last year. And I think that's a good thing. I think it's good that we're going to move away, hopefully, from PFPs and extremely expensive monkeys and things like that, because that, for me, it only shows a tiny fraction of what NFTs can really do. I think the real explosion in NFTs is going to come from the more the more kind of boring stuff, the more kind of nuts and bolts, stuff like, for instance, digital IDs, supply chain tracking, real estate on the blockchain, things like that. That, I think, and another one, ticketing for events, for gigs or festivals or whatever. That, I think, is where the real adoption for NFTs is going to come from. But again, how do you invest in that? How do you ride that wave? I guess really it has to be the layer ones. I mean, try picking the next big PFP project. It's pin the tail on the donkey, isn't it? It's really anyone's guess. You can't predict that. So I think, that's the reason. That's one of the many reasons that I'm bullish on these layer ones, because I think the NFT sector is only going to grow and get more useful, and it's going to be about where those what chains those NFTs are launched on. I mean, in terms of things like gaming and stuff, obviously that ties into NFTs a lot, and I think there's going to be a lot of growth in that sector. Gaming and metaverse is interesting because, again, like I kind of feel it's something that's, I'm not really hugely qualified to talk about it because I'm not a big gamer. I don't spend a lot of time playing games. I didn't really grow up playing an awful lot of games. But what's really interesting for me is, again, stuff that I hear kind of talking to people out and about, talking to people on the grapevine. And anyone with kids from about 10 upwards, and Ben, you might be able to speak to this as well, but anyone with kids of a certain age and above, they seem to, when they talk to their kids about it, their kids get it straight away. And you don't have to explain, the benefits of NFTs. You don't have to explain the benefits of, in-game currencies that can be, that can be moved out of those walled gardens and all that sort of stuff. They absolutely get it, and it's not an issue for them, And so I think gaming and NFTs is going to be a huge sector. I'm not sure if 2023 is necessarily going to be that year. But long term, I think as the kids of today become, the investors of tomorrow, I think that sector is going to be enormous. But yeah, I think maybe we have to wait a little longer for that. So yeah, at the moment, certainly in terms of what I'll be looking to pick up over the course of the year, it starts and ends with layer ones at the moment, because yeah, I think you've got to get the foundations right before you can start building
Right.
something massive on top of them.
Well, one thing to consider is, Ethereum, I know I've been bearish on Ethereum for 2022, and I still think there's some headwinds in the short term, but the truth is beyond Bitcoin, Ethereum is, in my opinion, it's the next bow. It gets you exposure to a lot of the different sectors of crypto, right? Because it's so intertwined in every part of crypto. If you're doing something in crypto, there's a good chance you're using ETH, right? Or doing something that requires it. So I think, I think that's true. The other thing I heard you mention, and I think it's interesting to talk about, it's actually a segue into the last question, is sort of a weird segue, but we were talking about NFTs, or you mentioned that it'll probably come from some of the more boring stuff, right? But what it is it's going to come from actual real world utility, actually what can it do? We just had a decade of speculating on what crypto will be, but it's also time for it to actually become what what we want it to be, right? And actually provide that utility. And I think sorry. I think that this higher interest rate environment, it's gonna make the best rise to the top, right? Because the zombie companies, this is where they go down. So the last question really is, with this recession looming, right? Well, theoretical recession, right? It seems like it's coming. We have the inversion of the yield curve. Fed's still hawkish. Earnings are coming down. Sort of seems like the economy is slowing down. Certainly the stock market has been in a bear market for at least a year. So how does crypto do in a recession, right? What happens? And again, this is assuming we get one. You could always make the case that there's one potential case that I think we have to think about, and that is we get a mild recession followed by QE, because the Fed, let's say inflation comes back down, But then if you look at the 40s and you look at the 70s, inflation came right back, right? So like what happens if they bring inflation down, we get out to 2024, 2025, and we go back to QE and everyone just starts YOLOing back into everything and everything starts going crazy again and we just get another round of inflation. I mean, this happened in the 70s and it happened in the 40s. There's a chance it happens again. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a high likelihood we will see a recession. Hard to say exactly how severe it's going to be. I mean, a lot of that's going to be dependent on what the Federal Reserve does and what central banks do. But how do you guys think crypto is going to fare during a recession, whether it comes this year, which seems like a high likelihood, or whether it gets delayed until 2024? What do you think? I mean, what is your do people still talk, or do you think the more fringe projects can survive a period where if people are just worried about how are they going to pay for gas? Do you think it makes the cream of the crop rise? Where do you think crypto goes during a potential recession? I think Guy, you're up first on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I think first up, I will be absolutely amazed if we don't see a recession this year. I know there are people who think, there's a chance we can avoid it. I can't see it. I think a recession for me is absolutely nailed on. And I think it's necessary. I think the worst possible thing really in the long term that could happen is if we see what you were talking about, Ben, which is possible. This idea of inflation appears to be going down because of the actions of the Fed and all these other central banks, and then they turn on the taps and we have QE again. I think that would be an absolute disaster in the long term. I think it would put today's problems in the shade. And I think people like Jerome Powell and stuff like that, they know that. I think Jerome has, he was stung by the fact that at first he said it was going to be, inflation was going to be transitory. And now I think he's absolutely determined that he will not be the guy who he will be the guy who brings inflation under control. And for some people, I don't know how many times he has to say it. That is the Fed's mandate. So that is what the Fed is wanting to do. So yeah, in a nutshell, I think we're almost definitely going to see a recession. So what does that mean for crypto? Yeah, it's going to be tough. I think for things like Bitcoin, I think we could see quite a lot of money flowing out. I think we'll see Bitcoin dominance increase even more because I think it will be especially tough for alts, obviously, and I think a lot of that money from selling of altcoins will go into will find its way into BTC. And yeah, I think it is certainly going to be a tough year for all risk-on assets. And I think again that ties into why I think firstly we'll see things going lower from here, but also why I think we'll generally see a year of fairly sideways price action. I think there are certain well-capitalized companies, institutions, individuals who will be looking to get into Bitcoin, especially if prices dip further from here. So I think there is some capital to help to sustain the market for a while. But it's certainly going to be a tough year for all risk-on assets and crypto in particular.
Right. Rob, I want to go to you with the same question, but before I do, I just want to remind people that we're getting close to the end of the show. So if you have any questions we'd like to get answered by any of us up here, make sure you put them in the chat, because after Rob answers, we're only going to have a few minutes to answer questions. Rob?
Yeah, so I'll just say like this, recession's probably, like we talked about, is probably going to come. I don't know how bad it's going to be, but I will just tell you, I know when people hear these things, first of all, if you're here right now, you're not a tourist. You've been around the block. You're probably going to do pretty well in crypto. All you got to do is
No pun intended, right? Around the block.
Yeah, no pun intended. No pun intended. You're probably going to do just fine. It's just sticking around. It's like in the military. All you got to do is show up with the right uniform and you get advanced. Pretty much. It's the same thing with crypto. Just stick around. It'll be okay. The thing is, though, is that, well, one thing, we have a friend named David from Texas, and he saw a crash coming in 2008, 2007, 2008. He was a big real estate guy. Sold all his real estate, sold a bunch of it, just sat on a bunch of cash. And then when 2008, 2009 came around, everything crashed down. He was making so many deals with the banks. He was picking up houses for pennies on the dollar. Why? Because as people were talking about, we'll never keep going down. We'll never go down. We'll never go down, never go down. And it just kept going up. He's like, at some point it will. And he was ready for it. So you watching this video, if you're here right now, you're not a moon boy. You're not a person who's like, oh, this will just keep going up forever. I think you're a pretty level-headed person if you're here right now. In 2025, then we'll deal with all the moon boys when that comes. But I think that's what's going to happen. But I will say this, just like in 2008, 2009, Ben, correct me where I'm wrong here about stocks. But I mean, how big is Amazon and how big is Alphabet or Google? It was enormous, right? And after the dot-com crash, it all went down pretty big in 2001. But how big did they crash in 2008, 2009? I think they dropped around 50%. Even though they were huge, they are for every day, they changed the world. The same thing is going to happen with crypto and digital assets. So even if they're going to change the world, you can't get caught up in the narrative because it's going to have to take a little bit of time. So with the recession coming in, Guy could be right, and Ben could be right. We could buoy it for a long time and just move sideways because we've seen that. But I think it might get a little bit tough, and people might need to sell. We might go down even more. Is that awful? Not if you're here for the long run. That's all I'll say.
I think Amazon went down 95% back, at least not during the dot-com crash. In the dot-com crash.
Dot-com, yeah. In 2008, 2009, I think it was less, but it was a lot. And you think to yourself like,
it was less because it had already taken a huge hit before, I think. But
exactly.
Yeah. All right, let's get through some a few quick questions. Question for Guy: they say, are you having your event in another event in London this year?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, that is the plan. Yeah, that is the plan. We're working on that at the moment. That is scheduled for the 10th of June, if I remember rightly.
All right.
So yeah, that is. We've had a lot of people asking for it. I was sort of like, are people going to want to come to a crypto event in the very coldest of crypto winters? But it seems like people are keen. So yeah, we're definitely working on it. Yeah.
Okay. Someone wants to know, what do you guys think about Polkadot? Anyone want to chime in about Polkadot? You think it'll survive crypto winter?
So there was a tweet I put out, which was that there's a letter of no interest, I think it was called, for the SEC, which means that the SEC would designate your project as not a security. And I talked about that because this is just rumors and rumors of people I hear in Puerto Rico and some big deep pockets and VCs and things like that. And they were telling me that there is some rumblings of the people they know, who knows, that it could potentially be a letter of no contest or whatever it's called. So that was what they were saying could potentially be Polkadot. Now, does that mean you should go out and run out and go buy Polkadot? No. You're listening to a guy who is talking to his computer with two other guys. That's a dumb move. So you need to make sure that you do your own research and don't do those things. And this, I mean, it could happen with Polkadot. They've already put it forward. I mean, the organization, but it could happen. I mean, with Gary Gensler in the house, good luck. You know, he's not leaving for how long, Guy? 2 years, somewhere on there.
Yeah, 2020. Isn't it 2026? His term finishes.
Even worse.
We're stuck with him for a long time. I do like the fact about Polkadot. I do think it's a great project. I'm impressed with the fact that Gavin Wood spent so much time last year. I think that's been his sole focus really for at least the last year, is decentralizing the project as much as humanly possible. They've been really, really laser focused on that because of Gary Gensler and co. So I think that's a big plus. I think also Polkadot, this goes back to what I was saying about Hong Kong. And again, a bit like you were saying, Rob, this is hugely speculative. This is a man talking to two other men on his computer. But if Hong Kong does go ahead and legalize retail crypto trading, and it does become a way for mainland Chinese investors to access crypto, not only will that be big for the whole sector, but it will be big for Polkadot, because Polkadot is one of the most popular crypto projects in China. So again, that is speculative, but that's one thing. I think it's one big thing it's got going for it. My main concern about Polkadot is competition, specifically Cosmos, which I think is another really cool project. But yeah, I think with a fair wind, Polkadot can survive and be around, for the next bull market, certainly.
Let's do two more questions and then we'll call it quits. So the next question is, do you think that if you're with regards to Ethereum, we have the Shanghai upgrade coming up relatively soon, and so the question, of course, is could that be, if there is another downturn in the market, could that mark the bottom, right? Assuming the bottom's not already in, because I know there would be some, potentially some people worried about a lot of unlocking of a lot of ETH in a very short time period. It could lead to some fear in that area. I do remind myself, because I've been bearish for 2022. I remind myself at some point in 2023 I have to flip bullish, right? Before we get too far. Before we get too close to the next halving. But what do you think do you think there's a chance that could be somewhere near a future bottom for Ethereum?
Personally, if you have the inclination to stake your Ethereum and when you first did it, you didn't know when it was going to be unlocked. You're like, could be next year, could be 5 years from now, who knows? If you have that much conviction in Ethereum, I don't know if when they unlock it, you're going to start selling like crazy, especially in this market. So I don't know if that's going to lead to a big crypto crash or more of a bottom. I think more of the contagion issues, the things we talked about with DCG and Grayscale and Gemini and Genesis. Right. That's just me.
It might be one of those things where people assume it might lead to something, but then after it comes, it's like, okay, well,
Yeah, I think actually, paradoxically, the unlock could actually cause more people to start staking, and I think by more people, I mean more kind of institutions and things like that, because it will be proof. There will no longer be any doubt. It's like if you stake your ETH, you will be able to unlock it because here's proof of that. So I think it could actually have the reverse effect. I think we could see more people getting into ETH in order to stake it because they've seen that it can be unlocked. That's again speculative, but I don't. It's not. It's certainly not something that's keeping me up at night. I don't think it will be as bad as some people are making out. And as you say, Ben, I'm much more worried about things like DCG. And all the selling that could come from that and Genesis and what have you.
Right, because that's one of those things where if they're just forced to liquidate, it's just like, well, there's nothing that can really be done, right? That could certainly. It's kind of like when you have FTX or Celsius or all these other things collapsing, right? Like it can have contagion effects in the market. Last question. Let's see if I could find a good one for the last one. Someone says, is the halving still a thing? I would say yes, it's still a thing. There's an interesting thing about the halving, and maybe this will be the last question, is there's always this argument around does the halving have an effect, right, on the price of Bitcoin? And you have two schools of thought, right? You have one school of thought that says it has no effect, it's priced in, and then the other school of thought is, well, no, it has an effect. I'm kind of in between, I think it does have an effect. It brings hype. I remember how much hype came after the last halving and the halving before that, and it certainly brought a lot of hype. It also, I think, is important that it has also come during periods of quantitative easing and access to cheap liquidity. Yeah. So I think it's probably a combination of both. What do you guys think? Do you think that having a Bitcoin in 2024 will help generate more hype again?
Guy?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. I think there'll be enough people who are interested in crypto and who are following it, who will be, who will see that and be ready to jump on that. I think also as well, with a bit of luck, it could also come at a time when there's been a noticeable improvement in just economic outlook in general. I think by that point, hopefully, we've seen really good evidence that inflation has really tumbled. And we could be talking about, a slight reduction in interest rates and things like that, economic activity picking up after a period of recession. Again, we could still be deep in that recession by that point. But I would hope that, the halving kind of, the fact that it could happen during a period when things appear to be picking up, I think that could be good for crypto as well.
Right. Well, the thing too, remember, is normally risk assets bottom during recessions. So the price might not be going up during that time, but that's probably where all the tons of people are probably going to be buying, at least the people with the longer term outlooks, right? But anyways, we should wrap it up there. It's been over an hour. Unless, Rob, did you want to add anything?
No, we've gone long enough. I got to do some things today. So
yeah,
it's a good show.
My lungs are stuck in traffic on Struggle Street right now, so I need to wrap this thing up.
Oh man!
But thank you guys for tuning in. Again, if you're not subscribed to Guy and Rob, links are down in the description below, and we'll just rotate it. Who are we gonna? What channel next week? Should we?
Guys.
I think it's going to be you next week, Rob. I think we
Okay.
I think it would be good. You guys tend to be a lot more tech savvy than I am, so I don't know. We can work it out, but
no, that's fine. We'll do Rob's channel next week. We'll do Rob's channel next week, and then we'll just rotate it every single week. So make sure you go subscribe to Rob, subscribe to Guy. Links down in the description below. If you're not already subscribed to them, you should already be subscribed to them. They've been on the channel before, and many more times in the future. I hope you guys enjoyed this new show that we have this year, and I look forward to having you guys on many more times in the future.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
See you guys next time.
Thanks.